George Washington was not only the first American president, the truth is that he created the office of the presidency and set the gold standard for future presidents to follow. Born in Virginia in 1732, Washington was trained as a farmer and a surveyor before he ever became a soldier, general, and leader. This agrarian livelihood is one that often beckoned to him, and one he always wished to return to, even after gaining power. He modeled himself off of a Roman figure, Cincinnatus, who gave up power after helping secure and protect Rome from its enemies. And perhaps like Cincinnatus, Washington's greatest skill was not his leadership or military prowess, but his reluctance to lead and his lack of ambition. He is also well known for his honesty and integrity. Although the story of him chopping down a cherry tree and saying, "I cannot tell a lie," is probably a fable, Washington was not without his flaws. He owned many slaves, whom he refused to free until after his wife died, and his famous wooden teeth were not wooden, but probably made from slave bone. Washington's first military experience was during the French and Indian War, helping the British defeat the French and their Indian allies in what is now the American Midwest. He served with distinction and bravery and rose to the rank of colonel, making him the highest-ranked American officer at the time of the start of the American Revolution. In 1759, he married the widow, Martha Washington, and basically adopted her daughters as his own, and tried to retire the family to a simple, quiet family life in Virginia on his estate at Mount Vernon. However, military duty and the duty to his country called him back, and he was the shoe and an obvious choice to lead the Continental Army during the American Revolution, a position in which he excelled at, and his wisdom and humility helped buoy his support. He was a great leader who inspired his men despite many great challenges, and after a devastating loss at the Battle of New York, he rallied his men, promising them victories if they stayed with him another month, and then made his famous crossing of the Delaware on Christmas in 1776. He also endured the hardships of Valley Forge with his men, refusing the officers' amenities that were granted to him, such as blankets and rations. Instead, he endured the harsh winter of 1777 to 1778 with calm and grace, and rallied his men. Washington helped build the American army into a formidable fighting force, and at the Battle of Yorktown in 1781, all of his efforts paid off. He sought to retire, but once again was called into duty, leading the Constitutional Convention as its president and trusting his fellow Virginian, James Madison, to draft most of the Constitution. That Constitution called for a president, and Washington was the shoe-in choice, becoming the first president of the United States when he was sworn in on April 30 of 1789 in New York. No one expected what the new president would do and what he would be called, but he insisted on being called Mr. President rather than His Majesty. Washington also excelled as a leader because he knew what he didn't know, and he relied on others, his skilled cabinet, made up of some of the smartest and brilliant men in America, such as his Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, and his Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, to create a balanced government. Washington also served as commander-in-chief, putting down the Whiskey Rebellion by raising an army and taking it to Pennsylvania in 1794. After getting a second term in 1792, Washington, once again, as he had at the end of the Revolutionary War, gave up power, refusing to run for a third term in 1796 and hoping to finally retire to Virginia. He gave one of the most famous speeches in American history, his farewell address, in which he urged the nation to remain neutral in foreign conflicts such as the ones raging between Britain and France, but also to abstain from partisan political divides which he believed would tear apart his beloved country which he had suffered so much for. He finally resigned to Mount Vernon and his beloved Martha in 1797, but died 2 years later at the age of 67, having lived one of the most incredible and accomplished lives in not just American history, but world history. At the end of his presidency, his fellow Virginian and statesman, Richard Henry Lee, had said he was first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. And in many ways, that holds true today as well.